It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. I'm Matt Barbett. Coming up, the shocking scale of negligence claims brought against NHS maternity departments. Last year, the health service in England spent over £1 billion settling complaints related to childbirth. That's more than a third of the entire maternity budget. Coming up, we'll hear from the mums left counting the physical and emotional cost and the campaigners who are calling for change. Also tonight, no rate relief just yet, but words of encouragement for mortgage holders. The Bank of England holds interest rates at a 16-year high, but the governor says things are moving in the right direction. We'll find out what it means for you. Plus, the incredible story of the British baby who was born deaf but can now hear unaided thanks to a pioneering gene therapy trial. And carnage caught on camera. I'll be speaking to the team behind a new documentary film about the unrest at Wembley ahead of the Euro 2020 final. All that to come and more on the UK Tonight. Good evening, good to have you with us. We start tonight with the shocking scale of complaints and negligence payments in NHS maternity departments. One mother, who was awarded more than £500,000 in damages, has described the trauma of suffering life-changing injuries in childbirth, telling Sky News she feels robbed of the joy of having her first baby. And she's not alone. Last year in England, the NHS spent £1.1 billion on maternity negligence payments, equivalent to a third of its entire maternity budget. Sky's Laura Bundock has this special report.
It's okay.
It took Amy Stead 3 years to fall pregnant, but her injuries from childbirth will last a lifetime.
So this is what it looks like, and there's my colostomy bag, and this all here is hernia. It felt like all the joy had been sucked out of having my first baby. At a time when a lot of people get to take their baby home and just enjoy those first few weeks, I was in hospital and I was having to have emergency colostomy surgery.
Amy's injuries were devastating, disabling and clinically negligent.
This is paperwork I've kept from the different specialists I had to see.
And although she worked at the hospital where she gave birth, she sued and has just been awarded £575,000.
It's been hard. It's been really tough. No amount of money can change that or make that better, but it certainly helps.
Amy's one of thousands of women who've successfully sued the NHS for poor maternity care. Figures for England show obstetrics make up 13% of NHS litigation claims, more than any other hospital department. £1.1 billion was paid out last year. To put that in context, the budget for maternity services is £3 billion. Litigation lawyers explain why the sums are so significant.
It's because of the physical impact and the psychological impact that they have on these women's lives that may prevent them from working and may prevent them from supporting their families.
Come on, let's see what I'm going to take you all down.
Campaigners want change. Rachel McGrath sued her hospital after her twins were born. She says litigation figures reflect underfunding and overworked staff.
Why is it easier to pay out? On maternity in particular, we are looking at staff, a workforce who are compassion fatigued because they are not supported appropriately in their roles. And that is leading to trauma and an unsafe system.
A system which left Amy with permanent injuries. She's focused on the future, but hopes her story helps others harmed by birth trauma. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Well, let's look at the figures now. 2.3% of women in the UK suffer obstetric trauma during natural deliveries where no instruments were used. That's the joint fifth worst rate in the OECD group of developed nations. It's a better performance than Iceland, which ranks the worst, with almost 4% of women experiencing trauma during childbirth. The countries with the best performance in the OECD, with trauma in just 0.2% of births, are Lithuania and Poland. Well, Laura joins me now to discuss this. It makes you wonder, Laura, why are there these problems in the UK? What are we getting so wrong?
Well, speak to people, and there's not just one problem here. They say that for years, maternity has been treated like a Cinderella service. That's another example of a condition that's exclusively for women, not being treated with enough seriousness. Ultimately, it needs more investment, but it needs more focused research that will bring about the right kind of care. But there are basic things in terms of listening to women better, understanding and supporting women in what is a really difficult, traumatic and potentially really challenging time for them as well, and continuity of care. And I think time and time again, I've spoken to women and found that they knew something wasn't going right, but no one was listening to them. So I think there's a bigger cultural change that needs to happen too.
It's costing an absolute fortune. The figures are eye-watering, spending £1.1 billion on sorting out these claims. A third of the budget. What a waste.
I know, it's crazy. For every pound we're putting into maternity services, 25p of that will never get anywhere near a midwife, a labour ward, basically. These are really big numbers. And it's not just maternal injuries. The even bigger sums are being paid out to families whose baby is injured, so suffers a traumatic brain injury, for example. But remember, the bar is set very high for litigation. It's a hard and it's a gruelling process. And you have to prove that not only was an act of negligence did it take place, but it caused a catastrophic injury. And, you know, Amy has been so brave speaking out in my report there, but it has had this huge impact on her life and those around her. Her husband stopped working for an entire year to look after her and their newborn son. She had to change her jobs because she didn't want a patient-facing role anymore. She had PTSD and she still needs surgery. There is this big piece of work coming out next week. It's an all-party, a cross-party inquiry looking at birth trauma. Maternal injury will form a big part of it. Campaigners and women like Amy just hope it has teeth, that it will bring about some change.
Yeah, it's so costly in every way. Laura, thanks so much. Next, the Governor of the Bank of England struck an optimistic tone today, despite holding interest rates at that 16-year high. But Andrew Bailey said things are moving in the right direction. Welcome news for homeowners looking to renew their mortgage soon, with the cut in rates appearing to be a little bit closer. Our economics editor, Ed Conway, explains.
Spring has sprung, but for many farmers across the country, it's too little too late. There's been so much rain in recent months that many of their fields, like this one, are simply not productive.
As a farmer, we're used to having a wet season, but when you have a wet summer backed up by a wet autumn, backed up by a wet winter, and then into the spring, it's just completely demoralising.
Agriculture is only a small part of the UK economy these days, but the rest of the economy has had its own problems. High inflation, high interest rates, low growth. But today the Bank of England said at least some of those issues were coming to an end.
Frankly, I have to say, this time last year, if we imagined, if we could have foreseen that we're going to be where we are today, we would have been really, pretty pleased, I suspect.
OK, so you're quite pleased with where things are.
Let's face it. The outlook this time last year.
Does it feel like a kind of semi-mission accomplished moment here?
Well, look, we're central bankers. We're cautious people. We never we don't think it quite in those terms. But I think we're well on the way now towards where I hope we'll be.
Even so, it's not quite ready to cut borrowing costs. So having ramped up so quickly to 5.25%, the real question now is when that line, interest rates, begins to come down. Because the longer it stays high, the more pain there is shared across the economy. And for many politicians, particularly government politicians, who want to hinge the next election on the state of the economy, it can't come down soon enough.
I think the path is, based on where we are today, and the world not changing, the path is downwards.
OK, but how soon?
Every meeting is a fresh decision. Every meeting in that sense is in play. I was very clear this morning. I said, look, it's not a fait accompli and it's not ruled out for the next meeting, which is in June, and the same would be true of August as well.
So it's possible in June, possible in August as well.
Yeah.
But that's too late for Harriet, who refixed her mortgage last month. Her monthly payments went up £500. These are the real-world consequences of higher interest rates being felt far beyond the City of London.
The timing is, it didn't land well for us. Should it have been in the autumn, then we may have got a better rate, which would obviously be better.
Spring is here, the flowers are out, and the economic news is getting better. But from the high street to the fields that provide our food, there are still scars from the last few years that will take some time to heal. Ed Conway, Sky News.
Joining me now is senior mortgage broker and founder of the financial advice service, The Mortgage Mum, Sally Mitchell. Sally, good to see you. What advice are you giving out right now, then, when it comes to mortgages? Hold your nerve?
Well, we have been saying that for since the beginning of the year. You know, it's got to change. There were green shoots. The city said, you know, we're expecting several reductions this year. And as time has gone on, you know, the truth has come through that actually we haven't seen anything. And now, instead of several reductions, we're looking at maximum of 2 before early next year. So, yeah, hold on. But actually, now is the time probably to not give in, but to just get something sorted if you're looking for a remortgage.
Look, let's put things in context, because for savers, it's fantastic, right? 5.25%, good for them. But let's just focus on the borrowers for the rest of our chat. I mean, the governor of the Bank of England is saying, oh, things are starting to look good. But I'm sure he said that before. Like you say, at the start of the year, we were expecting maybe 3 or 4 rate cuts this year. Now we'll be lucky if we get one in the summer and maybe one later in the year. Does it give you faith that they know what they're doing?
Yeah, I think they do know what they're doing. Unfortunately, you know, they have a very hard job, and I'm not one to blow smoke over them, but I think it's very tough. You know, we've all got our own needs, wants, desires, and as he said in your report, we're central bankers. We are very cautious. What they don't want to have happen is that they cut the rate, everyone goes yippee, and then inflation doesn't stay down. Inflation does bounce back, and we've seen it happen in America, and we do look at America very, very closely. And then we're in a worse state. What I don't think you can do is cut the rate and then put it back up. That would mean, people being questioned very, very closely as to, what on earth were they discussing in those meetings. So they have got to be cautious. Of course, we all want a reduction, and the government really want one as soon as possible so they can go to the polls.
Yes, indeed. Let's not get into the politics of it. We talk about that plenty here on Sky News. Let's talk about how it does affect borrowers. And I'm keen to talk to you about swap rates, because a lot of people perhaps don't realise that the way the banks set their lending rates for the rest of us are based on what they borrow from others. And we saw earlier in the year, when they thought there was going to be interest rates cuts coming, that mortgage rates were below the Bank of England base rate. Some of them still are hovering around about 4.95%, for example. Yeah. Is there any hint that the swap rates are showing the banks are confident that things are going to change soon?
They have been swinging around in the last month or so. They've been changing by 0.15 base points almost every day. So it's really hard to get a handle on it from the swaps. Certainly, when they come down, it's an indicator that the markets think that there are good times ahead, that the rates are going to come down. When we look at them, yes, they're going up, but they're not going up by an awful lot. And then they tend to come back down again. We get a good inflation result. Swaps come down a little bit. The city says, well, there's going to be no decrease in the base rate. Swaps go back up. We saw that in the last week or so, where most lenders actually increased their mortgage rates. And I have to point out that swap rates are what lenders look to when they're setting their fixed rates. So for fixed mortgages, it doesn't have an effect on trackers or their standard variable rates. So they've been swinging around all over the place. I think with this news, they will continue to go up and down a little bit. And although we are in a better position than we were this time last year or last autumn, when I was certainly quoting high 5s and 6s for rates, it is still high. And Harriet, in your film, seeing her mortgage increase by £500 a month, that is absolutely typical of what I'm seeing and what I'm having to tell my clients.
Yeah, definitely not high 5s all round, that's for sure, Sally. But let me just finish off. If people's mortgage rates are coming to an end, they're coming to an end of a fixed rate in the next 6 months, what's the advice? Go for a shorter fix, go for a tracker? What would you suggest to people watching who might have that coming up?
I would say get some individual advice that's tailored to your situation, because everybody is different. But if you're worried about missing out on a possible future decrease, go for a short-term fix. If you think you're going to want to dump that rate as soon as rates get better, then don't go for a fix, go for a tracker where there are no early repayment penalties for ending the contract, and then you can swap at will. Trackers are slightly more expensive, but there are some good deals out there.
Shop around, get good advice. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? You look at other countries, they can fix for 40 years, but that's a whole other discussion.
That's another evening.
It is another evening. We will do it another evening as well, Sally. Thanks so much for now, though. Appreciate it. Next, health bosses are urging families to make sure they are vaccinated against whooping cough amid a rapid rise in cases. 5 babies in England have died between January and March this year, with cases recorded in that period 3 times higher than the whole of last year. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has the story.
Secretaries of
her heart was getting affected and her brain was getting affected.
Baby Anusha was just 18 days old when she caught whooping cough. And at that age, she had little chance of surviving. Why didn't you take a vaccine to protect you and your unborn baby?
At the time, there was no program available to vaccinate pregnant women. A couple of years later, the scheme to vaccinate pregnant women was introduced. And had that been available at the time when I was pregnant with my baby, I would have taken it in a heartbeat, no hesitation whatsoever, just to have prevented this horrible, horrible situation.
5 babies in England have died with whooping cough amid a surge in cases. Between January and March 2024, there were over 2,700 whooping cough cases in England. But the year before, there were only 858 cases in total. And in infants under 3 months, there were 108 cases in the first 3 months of this year alone, compared to just 48 cases in the whole of last year.
The only way these babies can really be protected is by their mothers having vaccination during pregnancy. So our message really is that that's the thing for people to do. Pregnant women really must accept that offer of the vaccination in pregnancy.
Whooping cough is more infectious than COVID-19.
The bacteria that causes it has a very long infectious period. So when someone is infected, they can spread the bacteria for probably about 2 to 3 weeks. So that provides plenty of opportunities for transmission, hence why we see such an infectious outcome and why we see big outbreaks like these that we have at the moment.
Anusha survived against the odds. A simple vaccine will spare other parents the same trauma. Ashish Joshi, Sky News in central London.
Well, let's hear now from Dr. Nikita Kanani, a GP and former medical director of primary care for NHS England. Nikita, good to see you.
Hi, Matt.
How have we got to this stage? Because I remember whooping cough being a thing when I was a baby, and we seem to be back there again.
I know. Whooping cough, let's just go back to what it is. It's a bacterial infection. It's something that gets into the lungs. And at the beginning, it can feel like a normal cough or cold, a runny nose, a sore throat. And it's only really a week later that at night time, children particularly, but adults as well, can get these bouts of coughs, which are characteristic. You can hear a whooping noise. And it's a particularly strange bacteria because unlike some infections that are yearly or seasonally, whooping cough really comes around every 3 to 5 years. And the last time we had a real increase was about 2016. So sadly, we were well overdue a real increase in whooping cough cases. And obviously, we've had the pandemic in the middle, which suppressed the infection rates and actually changed people's immunity a little bit. So seeing these numbers rise is deeply worrying, but unfortunately quite consistent with the way that whooping cough spreads.
And it's a very recognisable cough, isn't it? It's hard to mistake it for something else.
Right, absolutely. So it's a very characteristic whoop and a real difficulty in breathing after the cough. So it does get worse at night time. Particularly babies, young ones are very vulnerable to this. They just can't catch their breath, and they almost look like they've passed out for a moment after they've had this coughing bout. Adults can get it as well, and for some people, you don't get the characteristic cough. So if you've got a cough in a very small one that's lasting more than a few days, they're not feeding well, they're feverish, they seem a bit what we call croisal, so a bit snotty, or not feeding well, we want to see them in general practice. We want to make sure that they get the care that they need. And if you're worried, NHS 111 or into the emergency department, because as I said, when you're very little, this is particularly worrying.
We saw during the pandemic that people formed quite strong opinions about vaccinations. Do you think that's playing a part in this?
I do think that people are getting what we call sort of vaccine weary or vaccine tired. And I can understand that. We keep talking about vaccines and we're hearing about them again and again. But at the end of the day, there's a strong evidence base for this vaccine program. You heard on the video, what a difference the pregnancy vaccination program makes. These are vaccinations that we've had them for years, and we've been having them for years. So it's really important that people take up the offer when it's there. For pregnant women, that's in the later stages of pregnancy. After 20 weeks, you'll be offered a vaccination. And for children, it's part of that 6-in-1 jab that you get at 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and then you get a booster at about 3 years and 4 months, just before you start school.
Nikita, I have to ask, of course, the pandemic affected a lot of things and a lot of other, bugs doing the rounds now when perhaps they would have been suppressed in a different way through natural immunity. There's something going around at the moment called the 100-day cough amongst all age ranges. Is that related to this in some way, or is that just another thing that's doing the rounds?
No, it's a good question. I don't think it's related to whooping cough, but I do see a range of different coughs presenting. Remember, all of the coughs that we talk about have a very similar sort of background, and people have been getting longer coughs or coughs that last for longer. So we do say, particularly in the NHS, if you've had a cough for more than 3 weeks, if it's not improving, NHS 111, get in touch with a GP practice. We need to just see what's going on.
Yeah, if you can get an appointment, and that's, again, a whole other discussion. Nikita, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. That was Dr. Nikita Kanani. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, a British girl born totally deaf has her hearing restored thanks to a pioneering new treatment. And out of his cage, King Charles cracks jokes with soldiers in Surrey as he resumes public duties.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
I'm Dan Whitehead, and I'm Sky's West of England correspondent.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. We help you to understand the world with us.
I'm Adam Parsons, I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
Now, a British girl who was born totally deaf has had her hearing restored after becoming the first person in the world to take part in a pioneering new gene therapy trial. Look at that face. Opal Sandy was born with auditory neuropathy, which disrupts nerve impulses from the inner ear to the brain. But the 18-month-old's hearing is now almost normal and could improve further after having the one-time treatment.
When we initially heard her turning to clapping, I was like mind blown that it had worked. Like, I sat behind Opal countless times when she's had, to us, ridiculously loud noises blared through speakers in a sound booth, and she's never once turned. So to see that happen is mind blowing.
The lovely thing about this particular condition as a model for where gene therapy should be safe and effective is that the anatomy is absolutely perfect. So the only problem is that the inner ear doesn't talk to the nerve that takes the sound signal to the brain. So by using gene therapy, we can put the working gene into the inner ear, and that means that the signal will start to flow again. So as we've seen with Opal, then it really is effective, and because we can just deliver it just to that tiny little area in the in her inner ear, then it's very safe.
Well, we're joined now by Dr. Ralph Holm, Director of Research at the Royal National Institute for Deaf People. Good evening to you, Ralph. There's nothing to say about this apart from it's just brilliant news, isn't it?
Yeah, it is incredible. And I think for people who are looking for better treatments and better hearing for their children, then it's really exciting and really tremendous, and really shows the potential that gene therapy might have in the future. I guess it's important to remember that this gene therapy is only for people with a specific type of genetic deafness. I think what's so significant about this is that the know-how and the technology that's being developed will really kind of pave the way for other gene therapies for other types of genetic deafness in the future. But yeah, really, really exciting. And it's worth remembering this is the first treatment that's actually sort of fixing the root cause of someone's hearing loss. So a real game changer, I think.
But we've already been hearing this evening about the difficulties of childbirth, people going through that, and then they've got their little bundle of joy at the end of it. To then be told their baby is diagnosed with deafness, automatically they'll be thinking, what's their whole life going to be like with this prognosis? And now, in this case, for parents like Joe and James of Opal there, well, it's a huge burden lifted off them as well. Does it give hope to a lot of other parents too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's worth remembering that not everybody wants access to treatment. So some people don't see hearing loss as a medical problem. But for those families that are looking for better treatments, then yeah, this really is a big change and a big gives people a lot of hope.
The doctor we heard from there describing how it works made it sound stupidly simple, really. I'm sure it isn't. There's been a lot of work, a lot of research done here. How just groundbreaking is that research that's led to this moment?
Yeah, so first of all, scientists had to understand what the gene that Opal has that doesn't work properly does. So the gene's called otoferlin. It encodes a protein that's required to allow the sort of hair cells that detect sound in the cochlea to sort of send that information to the brain along the auditory nerve. So scientists had to understand what does the gene actually do. They then had to develop a harmless virus that could deliver that kind of a working version of the gene into the cochlea and make sure it was expressed and allowed that information to flow back along the pathway from the ear to the brain. So a lot of research has gone into this.
Do you think there could be lessons from this that could help other people with this kind of deafness, even if they're not babies, even if they've grown up with it and they're still living with it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the kind of research shows that the younger you are when you kind of restore hearing, the better outcomes you have. So this particular trial is just looking at children under the age of 2. But as I was saying before, I think the technology that's being developed will allow other types of genetic deafness to be kind of tackled as well. So there's already research underway looking at trying to repair a gene that's involved in maintaining the voltage within the cochlea, which is so important. It's another gene being investigated that's really important in maintaining the function of an outer hair cell in the cochlea, which acts as an amplifier, sort of helps make sounds louder. So yeah, I think it does feel like we're at the dawn of a new era, and there's going to be a whole range of gene and cell therapies and drug therapies coming along, and the future won't just be hearing aids and cochlear implants. And at RNID, we're committed to funding the best research around the world and really making that happen.
Well, this is fantastic, and to see the looks on their faces and to see baby Opal as well there, I mean, just, I'm sure it brightens everyone's day. Ralph, thanks so much for joining us. That's Dr. Ralph Home of the RNID. Next, the King has been heard joking with military personnel during a visit to the training base for the Army's Royal Engineers.
I do apologise for taking you by surprise. When this opportunity appeared, I've been allowed out of my cage.
His Majesty there, joking that he's glad to be out of his cage and undertaking public duties, which he resumed last week following his cancer diagnosis. The monarch appeared in very good spirits as he met with the Royal Engineers and their families, who presented him with flowers and gifts. Still to come on the UK Tonight, how thousands of ticketless fans turned the Euro 2020 final between England and Italy into a dangerous and ugly spectacle. Now, it was the biggest sporting fixture to be held in the UK since the 1966 World Cup final, not including the Olympics, of course. But when England hosted Italy at Wembley for the Euro 2020 final a year late, the day was marred by violence and disorder. A report later concluded that 6,000 ticketless fans turned up, with many of them hell-bent on getting into the stadium. The events of that day are the subject of a new documentary film, The Final Attack on Wembley.
COVID had people cooped up. They're ready to go wild. People drinking heavily, taking cocaine.
We're just there for a good time.
It's getting out of hand.
There was limited police presence.
It was just carnage.
And then it gets violent. There are thousands of supporters without tickets want to be in the stadium.
There's people getting trampled on.
We felt like we were under attack. My only thought was to protect my daughter. There was blood and there was bandages.
I watched it last night. It's gobsmacking. And I'm joined now by the documentary's co-director, Rob Miller, and senior producer, Laide Sadiq. Good to see you both. My biggest takeaway from it was there's a lot of drunk, coke-fueled racists out there, and they're often at football matches. It's a bit depressing, isn't it, really, when you think about it?
Well, you know, I think it was a reality of that day, certainly.
Yeah.
The kick-off for the football match was at 8 o'clock. People started arriving at 8 o'clock in the morning and therefore had 12 hours to indulge in whatever alcohol or illicit substances that they could get their hands on. So it was certainly a feature on that day. I think the day actually started with a great feeling of optimism and national pride. I mean, you have to remember that this tournament took place at a time where the country was overcoming or struggling to overcome the trauma of COVID. And there was a lot of division and we were all locked away in our homes. And suddenly you have this freedom and you have all these people to celebrate with. But there was clearly very serious high levels of inebriation and drug taking. And over a course of a 10 to 12 hour period, that led to the kind of shameful violence that we saw on the day.
And Laida, that's how the film goes. It goes over that, 12 hours to kick off, 10 hours to kick off, that kind of thing. It does, look, we don't want to point the finger of blame at people. Ultimately, it's the people who are trying to force their way in who are the ones to blame. But the authorities didn't perhaps quite get that outpouring of emotion, that freedom that had come post-pandemic, of all those people who got there. They kind of underestimated that a bit.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, a lot was happening in central London, and I think they hedged their bets on central London, and rightly so. It was equally messy.
Yeah.
It was, it was chaotic, but I think at the same time, you want to believe people are going to behave themselves when they go to a football match, particularly one that everyone was so excited for and everyone was waiting for a very, very long time.
I mean, the thing about it is, we suddenly thrust back to what felt like the dark days of football hooliganism. I go to football matches. I've been going to football matches for 25 years, and there've been progress, and I've taken my daughters to matches, and then suddenly this was reminiscent of the worst times in the 80s when the behaviour was appalling.
I think that's the place that we started off with when we started making the film, that we looked at I mean, personally, I wasn't at the game.
Yeah.
And I was very much focused on...
Was that by choice, or would you have gone?
No, I would have... Look, if I'd had a ticket, I would definitely have been
But you
there.
sensibly didn't go without a ticket?
I sensibly didn't go. I enjoyed it from the kind of comforts of my living room. But my focus was very much on the build-up to the game, and I was kind of very unaware of what was happening outside until I started making this film. And I mean, I was conscious that, there had been incidences, there had been some violence, some people had broken in. But it was only when I kind of sat down and started watching the kind of voluminous amount of kind of UGC material that you realised how kind of bad it was. And we started off with this idea that, is this reminiscent of the 80s? I think it's less reminiscent of the 80s. But the 80s hooliganism, you had two firms meeting at a football match, carrying weapons, and their sole purpose was to fight each other. Whereas it was a lot of young people who had been cooped up in their houses due to COVID, who suddenly had this freedom, and as a result of the excess, you saw this kind of explosion of violence. So I don't think it necessarily means that we're going back to the 80s, but there is definitely an issue. There was most certainly an issue on the day, and it's something that the police in particular have to kind of continue to be aware of at football grounds around the country.
I mean, you mentioned UGC, user-generated content is what that means, because everyone's got mobile phones, they're all pointing them at each other. Laide, I have to ask, racism rears its head in this in several ways. You have a British Asian football fan there, and he's talking about, after the match, thinking, well, I'm going to get abuse now because it was 3 black or mixed-race players who missed the penalties. The abuse that was then heaped on Sancho, Saka and Rashford, and the defacing of his mural in Manchester. Yeah. My heart sunk seeing that.
Yeah, it's difficult to watch. It's difficult to take in. I think it's not the first time, and I'm not sure it'll be the last time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people of colour, but also people in general who are aware of these issues, can recognise that sometimes there's conditions on Britishness, and if you're doing right by the country, you're one of us, and you make a mistake, you're not.
Which Ugo Monye says in the film, doesn't he? And he's played rugby for England too.
And I think, you know, these are young players who are living their dreams playing for England. And I love football. I used to play football. I think penalties are quite nerve-wracking, especially for tens of thousands of people watching you. I think you make a mistake, it shouldn't have anything to do with the colour of your skin. And unfortunately, what we've seen a lot in football and in other sports is that if you miss a penalty, if you've mistimed the tackle, if you've given away a penalty, suddenly your race is the biggest factor, and I'm not sure why that is.
Let's finish up on a positive, because people can see the film. It's on Netflix now. It came out there yesterday. Another big takeaway is just how talented a group of players England had at that point in time. A lot of them are back. Saka's still on form. Kane's still banging in the goals, even though he's doing it in Germany. That could be a good sign. It's looking positive for the Euros this year, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think the answer, the players answer the kind of racist abuse by their performances on the pitch, and the film ends reflecting, or looking forward, I should say, to the next Euros. And we had an amazing team then, I think, with the introduction of the likes of
Jude Bellingham.
Who is a generational talent.
He really is.
I think we've got every reason to be kind of optimistic, and fingers crossed we win that trophy.
I'm hopeful. I think this is the year. It's an amazing side.
Yeah.
And I think you want to think, well, this is the year it's going to happen.
I think Trent's the key, but then that's because I support Liverpool, and I think Trent should start in every game he ever wants to start in. Rob, Laide, thanks so much. Well done on the film. As I said there, it's on Netflix right now, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yep. Good to see you both. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight. Scotland's strongest siblings, I almost said strangest, no, they're very strong. I'll be speaking to the world's strongest man, Tom Stoltman, as well as his brother and fellow very strong man, Luke. And in sport, Phil Foden, Declan Rice and Cole Palmer all make the shortlist for Premier League Player of the Year.
With the way we change our shopping now, most of our transactions are now done online, so we're definitely more susceptible to scamming than we ever have been before. So there was an investigation led by the Guardian, and it was reported yesterday, about a huge number of fake websites that have been created. And basically it's using the branded goods, or all the premium shops, all the things that we would like to buy. So it's everything from Prada down to our Clarks. And what they're actually using is that branded name in the website somewhere that it then entices us to go in to buy a purchase. But unfortunately, what we're then doing is, one, passing on our personal details, and secondly, buying or potentially buying from a fake website that actually doesn't exist. So when your expectation is then you've bought your shoes or whatever you've done, you put it into your checkout, you're expecting your shoes in 14 days time or whatever, and it doesn't arrive. And of course, then you're in the situation where you have passed on your credit card details and you don't have your goods that you think you bought. What you really have to do is make sure that in the top button and the search button, it is the exact website that you're looking at. Sometimes what we're finding is that might have in fake websites, you might have something like Prada.net or Prada handbags. What you're looking for, what you actually need is the correct website and the correct shop in the first place. So there's little things like that, making sure that you are logging on to or putting the right details into the search engine in the first place. Unfortunately, we are in the situation now where we don't have as much money as we used to have. We are always looking for bargains, and that is why we become more susceptible to these sort of low price, too good to be true deals. And you are right. If it looks too good to be true, it possibly is.
Welcome back. Coming up, I'll be speaking to two incredibly tough brothers, the world's strongest man and his older sibling, Europe's strongest man. But first, Teddy is here with the sport. Teddy, good to see you.
Good evening.
The shortlists have been announced for Premier League Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year, with quite a few English players making both lists.
I know you were talking optimistically before the break about English chances at Euros. Maybe it's very much a sign. Phil Foden, we know, is the Football Writers' Player of the Year already. He's got up against his teammate Erling Haaland, who's looking to retain the award for Premier League Player of the Year. But Foden, 16 goals, 8 assists in the Premier League, really carried City through those winter months when Kevin De Bruyne was injured. Then you got Declan Rice, the big money signing for Arsenal in midfield. I think he's really grown. He's signed as a holding player. That's where he plays.
Oh, he's repaid the money
for England.
Hasn't he?
But he's going forward, isn't he? He's scoring goals. He's got 7 goals, 9 assists, and I think particularly recently, more swashbuckling performances from him. Maybe we'll see him released a little bit for England. And then you've got Cole Palmer, who made that big decision to leave Haaland and company and go to Chelsea, and has kind of carried them, really, 21 league goals, and they're on the cusp of European qualification. Real bright spot for them. And then Aston Villa really needing a goal, by the way, tonight in the Conference League. They've had Ollie Watkins as their star player to lead them on the brink of Champions League qualification. 19 goals and 12 assists. Some people say it's contentious maybe for the young player of the season, that Phil Foden, after 5 league titles, still in the Young Player of the Year contention. But Bukayo Saka, another English player, is there. And Kobbie Mainoo made his debut for Manchester United at 18 and perhaps been one of the real signs of hope and optimism in a very difficult season for Manchester United. So plenty of English talent involved. But, as we say, Haaland is there. Premier League top scorer with 25 goals in 28 games. So it remains to be seen whether anyone can oust him.
I have Foden, Palmer and Watkins in my fantasy team, actually.
Do you? Van Dijk is on the list, by the way, I should say, for the Premier League Player of the Year.
I mean, the best defender in the world. Of course he is, playing for the best club. Who's in the running for Manager of the Year? OK, well, no surprise. We talk about Manchester City, that once again it's Pep Guardiola. He's won it 4 times, but also his apprentice, if you like, Mikel Arteta at Arsenal, vying for the title. Then you've got Jurgen Klopp of Germany. No British managers in the reckoning here, of course, unfortunately. But Unai Emery and Andoni Iraola. So by my reckoning, 4 of the 5 are Spanish managers. So there's a big domination there. So we'll wait to see. Vote, by the way, is up until the 18th of May, the final day of the season, Sunday, when every team plays. So it could be that, things are maybe decided in this vote before the actual title, fingers crossed, is decided on that Sunday. OK, so that's the situation.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Your team at Ajax were one of the most beautiful teams to watch. The way they played football were amazing. But you said you couldn't play that style here. No. And it always interested me, that, thinking about... Because when Louis van Gaal came to Manchester United, he played a style that was, I would say, very Ajax, Barcelona style. Why could you not bring that style here? Why did you feel like you couldn't play the style in terms of the same style?
Because then you have to bring in players. So then you need
Back
a budget.
recruitment.
In the recruitment, you need the players with those typical assets. And you can't bring a player, say, who is here, who has a typical style of play, and I don't want to change his nature.
Yeah. And so Frankie de Jong would have been allowed you more to play this style maybe if he'd have been brought in a couple of years ago.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, if the world's strongest man is a crucial part of your TV viewing and you don't want to know this year's winner, you need to look away now, because my next guests must be the strongest brothers in the entire world. Tom Stoltman from Invergordon in the Highlands has just won World's Strongest Man for the third time, the first British athlete to do so, making him one of the sport's greatest ever competitors. Older brother Luke is no slouch either, winning the European Strongest Man in 2021, the same year that Tom won the world title for the first time. Tom's success is all the more remarkable because he is autistic, which he describes as his superpower. He uses his story to raise awareness of autism and encourage others to recognise their own potential. And Tom and Luke join me now. It's really good to see you both, and I have to apologise because I almost read it wrong, said you're the world's strangest brothers, which is clearly not the case. You're both incredibly strong. It's Tom on the left, Luke on the right. I think I've got that right, haven't I? Tom, first of all, congratulations on getting the hat-trick, bettering Jeff Capes, I think, back in the day.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, 3 World's Strongest Man titles at 29 years old, the first British guy to do it. It's a very special moment for myself and the family. So.
How hard was it? Because you've got a sort of arch rival from Canada that beat you last year, and you beat him this year.
Yeah, I think myself and Mitchell Hooper will be going back and forth for a long time. It's a very good and healthy rivalry, and he pushes me, I push him. And this year I had to do different things in the gym, and thankfully I did, and we came out the winner. So yeah, it's a very good rivalry we have.
Tom, what did you do differently in the gym? Because I like to work out a bit. So what can I learn? What can I learn from your special skills?
I mean, I actually started running. I did some 2Ks and did a more workload in the gym. So I made sure that I was fitter, not getting stronger. So I was making sure I was doing more rep work and more kind of conditioning work as well. Because at World's Strongest Man, it's a 5 to 6 day competition. So you have to be fit as well as strong.
Luke, you're no slouch either. I think you came 9th, is that right, in the world? You're obviously European champ previously. And congratulations to you, because you became a dad this year too. So well done there. It's not easy for us dads to be flexing the muscles anymore, is it?
Not so much, not so easy, but we still try, bless us. We've got to do something, right? But again, just really proud of Tom for putting in a really professional performance, and just so amazing to see it. Sitting next to him as 3 times World's Strongest Man, especially with all the adversity that Tom's overcome in his life, and to see him now flourishing to the man that he is now, it's just pretty incredible to have him sat next to me as 3 times World's Strongest Man.
Look, I'm a big brother, and I'm so proud of my younger brother as well for different things. You sort of help him out as well, right? Yes, you go and compete, and you're competing against each other, but really, Luke, I know you offer a lot of support to Tom when he's competing too.
Yeah, I think it's very much a team effort. You know, when we go out to the big competitions like World's Strongest Man, Tom's wife's there, a nutritionist, Tom's coach, I'm there. I'm very much a big brother to Tom, so I try and, protect him as much as I can. Not that a 6'8", 190 kilo man needs much protection, but I think it's just the energy that we bring together when you have that kind of bond and that unconditional love for each other. You have that form of energy, that positivity, and when I shout for Tom and Tom shouts for me, and those are the 2 most powerful things I think that you can have out there. We go out to a competition with that. No one else has that other brother there supporting them on. So it's really cool, and I mean, just to see Tom go from that kind of younger, shy boy to the man that he is now today. I think Tom will say to himself, he owes a lot of it to the gym, and all the stuff he's learned in the gym, the social stuff, the talking on camera, being in front of people, being comfortable talking in front of people. It's incredible to see. So I think Tom is a real inspiration to a lot of young kids watching.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Tom, just describe why you say that autism in this regard is your superpower.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously when I first started this sport, like Luke said, you know, I was a shy boy. I got labelled the wrong ways. Everyone used to say it was a disability and stuff. And
yeah.
for me, you know, to win my first World's Strongest Man title in 2021 and to be like, I've got autism and I've just beat 29 other people who don't have this. And then that's when I said, like, that's a superpower. You know, anyone with autism can do anything they want. And, you know, I'm the blueprint of that. I try and promote it as much as I can. And I try and turn someone who has autism into this positive, this superpower, because, you know, I've lived with it my whole life. I'm controlling it now, and it is one of the most powerful things you can ever live with. And yeah, like 3 times world's strongest man who has this superpower. It's mental what I've achieved in myself, and you know, I pinch myself every day because, like Luke said, I was a young kid, locked myself into my room to then 10 years later be this guy that's on top of the world promoting autism in a positive light.
And the truth is, Tom, in saying that, there's absolutely no one who's going to argue with you because you are the strongest man in the world, and they would be stupid to do so. Luke, let me just finish off. I mean, there must have been some sibling rivalry when you were growing up. I know you're about 10 years older than Tom. I mean, do you ever compete now? Do you ever, like, hunker down and have an arm wrestle to see who's really the strongest in the family?
Not so much the arm wrestle, but Tom and I, we have the privilege of training together every day, you know, in the gym. So that rivalry is still very much there. And, you know, I have the privilege of going against probably the greatest strongman of our generation. So that kind of pushes me on, although I don't beat Tom very much in the gym now. Unfortunately, I think my age is catching up on me. I'm 40 this year. So, but yeah, there's always a rivalry between us. But I think that's what makes us so successful. You know, with these titles, it's not a coincidence that's, you know, that's the kind of secret ingredient, I think, to being so successful, is having that brother, having that world's strongest man against me, and I'm Europe's strongest man against Tom. So we both test ourselves every day, and I think that's the cool thing.
If it was my brother, I'd drop one of those big stones on his foot just to get one over on him.
Tom,
Luke, thank you so much. And Tom, congratulations again. Really brilliant achievement to get the hat-trick. Good to see you both.
Thanks so much.
Brilliant brothers there. Before we go, just time to tell you about a warning that some of our best-known insults like plonker, prat and numpty are in danger of dying out. Researchers put a range of traditional British slights to adults under the age of 28, 20 years younger than me, the Gen Z demographic, to find out which ones they'd heard of. Toe rag and drip are among the insults to fare worse, as well as nitwit, ninny and blighter. It could get worse than that. Luckily, those are all Ofcom friendly because no one knows what they mean. That's all from the UK Tonight. You can catch up on our highlights on our webpage. Yalda is up next with The World. Bye for now.